Welcome to the last in our series of shorts on the management of temporary works. This presentation will be looking at the management processes and how they should be implemented for temporary works on site. Within temporary works, there's a number of management processes you should be implementing to help you manage and implement the temporary works on site. Within this presentation, we're going to concentrate on the following areas: the duties of the designers, the design brief, Table 2, and the categories for independent design checks, Table 1, the risk classifications for temporary works, the design check certificate, and the temporary works register. Designers of temporary works come under the CDM 2015 regulation requirements. Designers should be qualified and competent to perform their design duties and coordinate design activities. Design organisations should verify the competence of both designers and the checkers for temporary works. Designers should address buildability of permanent works and understand how the temporary works will affect it. Designers of temporary works should try and avoid risks whenever possible, be these design risks or health and safety risks. When they cannot be avoided, risks should be evaluated to make sure that they are addressed at the lowest possible denominator. They should combat risks at source. And they should adapt their methodologies of use of equipment and environments with which they are implemented to be able to evaluate monotonous tasks and predetermine work rates so they can increase health and safety on site. They should adapt their technical processes. They should replace dangerous activities with non-dangerous activities or less dangerous ones wherever possible. And they should develop a coherent overall prevention policy which covers technology, organisation of work, working conditions and social relationships, and influence factors relating to the working environment. They should also be giving collective protective measures priority over individual protective measures, and give appropriate instructions to employees where these are to be implemented. When assessing our risks, we should try and evaluate them within the following hierarchy of control. We should eliminate risks whenever possible by either changing the working activities or changing the way we implement design elements. Can we use trusses over traditional roof design, building the roof at ground level and then lifting it up into place? This would reduce the exposure to the risk. Can we reduce the hazards by sourcing less dangerous materials or reducing the exposure to that type of risk? Can we isolate a working process by using robots, barriers, screens, cages, or different methodologies on site to reduce the exposure to different people and to the workforce? Can we control exposure by implementing safe systems of works, permits and processes that when people do have to work in areas of high risk, that they have limited exposure to it and know the methodology within which they should be working within that environment? As a last resort, we should then implement PPE which is suitable and sufficient to protect the workforce. This could be in the form of harnesses, helmets, gloves, ear protection, eye protection, and a numerous other PPE systems we use on sites. But we should always implement a discipline and a culture of safety within our site, making sure that people identify issues and report them through fault finding on our projects. When looking at the management of temporary works, one of the first things we will produce is the temporary works brief. The design brief should be prepared to serve for a basis of all decisions, design works, calculations, drawings and design checks. It will include all the permanent works design elements to enable the temporary works designers to incorporate them into his decision making. All parties concerned with the construction activity should contribute towards the preparation of the design brief. This includes subcontractors, the principal contractor and the principal designer. The design brief should include all data relevant to the design of the temporary works, including residual risks introduced by the methodology chosen by the site team or by the permanent works designer. These should be prepared early enough to allow sufficient time for all sequential activities, initial design plus challenges, design checks, procurement of equipment and construction erection of the temporary works scheme. It should also allow prior training to be implemented. Details of any design organisation, including the names of the designers, contact details and their responsibilities should be included in the design brief. All the drawings for the permanent works, the limitations imposed by specific authorities, including rail, highways, watercourses, local councils and the Environment Agency, should all be incorporated. Specific site and environmental risks should be included, including anything that has come out of the environmental impact assessment. Construction programme and how it will the temporary works will affect it. Design phase programme. Timings for the removal of temporary works and critical loadings. Access requirements. Equipment and materials. Moving and reusing of temporary works if they're going to be repeated across the site. Location, topographical and site geological information should be included within the design report. Any services which will be interacted or needed. Local authority requirements including noise licenses. Considerate contract briefs and other engagement with local stakeholders. Once the design has been completed, design checks are required to be implemented. Prior to the commencement of any construction works, the proposed temporary work design should be checked for the concept, adequacy and correctness and compliance with the requirements to the design brief. More details of these are outlined within BS 5975. Within the BS, Table 2 has 4 levels of design checks, which should be carried out as the complexity of the project increases. Level 0 is for standard off-the-shelf low-level technologies such as trench boxes and proprietary formwork. These should be checked off by the manufacturer in the design stage and should be confirmed as in compliance with the requirements of the design brief. Level 1 is for simple designs, small temporary works projects within the construction project which are required to be checked by another member of the design team within which they've been facilitated. These could be such areas such as hoarding, signage or propping for single-storey brickwork construction. They are low-level projects which need to be checked to be able to implement it on the site. More complex projects will fall under Section 2. Foundations, the design of open excavations, overhead galleries and more detailed scaffolding systems will fall into this category. They need to be checked by an individual outside the organisation for which has done the original design. This will allow a total standoff check to be conducted. More complex designs will fall into Level 3. Design checks will be carried out by an independent organisation with no connection to the original design organisation. This will allow a detailed analysis and feedback of any issues what may be in the original design. On completion of the design check, a design check certificate should be issued. Within this certificate it should state that when the design has been checked and deemed satisfactory, the design check certificate should then be issued, stating the category of check, a level 1, 2 or 3. He should confirm the design compliance with the following areas: the requirements of the design brief, design standards, technical literature, and loading and unloading conditions which have been imposed within the design. And is the design fit for the intended purpose stated in the design brief? Once completed, the certificate and supporting information should be issued to the principal contractor's temporary works coordinator. To make sure that risks are controlled on site at the right level before any works to erect or deconstruct are conducted, the following checks need to be conducted. Does the design concept still remain workable within the conditions on site? Check the temporary works design for the strength and structural adequacies, including the foundations and lateral stability, and is it robust enough? Things may have changed in the design since the initial brief was issued. Is the design still compliant with the design brief and is it still fit for purpose? So have things on site changed the facilities or the loadings or the stability of the temporary works and against the original brief. When managing the inspection on who can carry out these on site, we then refer to Table 1 from the BS. This has again 4 categories ranging from very low to high allocating who and within the temporary works process is able to sign off works before they can progress. The 4 areas in Table 1 can be divided down into these 3 areas when looking at the level of permit to be issued for them. For very simple, low level and low risk projects, covering areas such as formwork up to 1.2 metres high, basic hoarding systems, standard scaffoldings and simple low level propping systems. These could be signed off on site by a temporary work supervisor who is current and competent and authorised in that area of works, or the principal contractor's temporary works coordinator. As projects become more medium risk or more complex, using examples such as false work up to 3 metres high, formwork for columns and walls up to 3 metres high, needling of structures up to 2 stories high, large excavations, and the other areas shown in the centre of the screen, the level of permit system will need to be more controlled. The principal contractor's temporary works coordinator will normally sign off these levels of projects unless they become more complex, where the temporary works designer himself may be needed to sign off the permit. As we move into more complex and high risk projects, looking at bases for tower cranes, large false works, large needling systems, groundwork supports, cofferdams and etc., and the other areas you can see on the right hand side of the screen, you will normally need the temporary works designer himself or a specific authorised engineer to come in and sign off these levels of works before anything can progress. Each company should identify their own level of permit system and who within their temporary works processes should be implementing these permits on site. So let's have a look at some of the basic examples in the different areas. For low risk and low complexity projects, as you can see here on the right hand side of the screen, these can include low level formworks. These can be signed off, as we've already stated, by a current and competent and authorised temporary works supervisor or the principal contractor's temporary works coordinator. For more high risk projects, such as bases for cranes and high level tower cranes, these will need to have a more high level of authorisation and will possibly need the temporary works designer himself to come in and sign them. Between these 2 projects is for medium risk and medium complexity. These are normally authorised by the principal contractor's temporary works coordinator, but could possibly, on their complexity, need a temporary works designer to come in and assist with the permit system. These could be areas such as the needling of a building to support openings being installed, or to be able to support upper structures of the building while other works are being conducted. Here you can see an example of a needling system being installed. So once the design stage and the risk management has been identified, and we understand what level of permit is to be issued for different types of works on site, and the full design brief has been issued to the temporary works coordinator and the temporary works supervisors, we will then start the implementation of a temporary works register to manage these works within the project on site. The temporary works register acts as a verification tool to ensure that the safe procedures are used and followed accordingly. What is important is that it is maintained and kept up to date as the project progresses by your temporary works supervisors and then reported back into the principal contractor's temporary works coordinator. Here is an example of a temporary works register. There is no set definition of what one should include, but the standard areas of the type of works, where they are on site, what classifications they are, the levels of checks, and who is conducting these checks and when and where they were conducted are minimum areas you should be looking at for implementation within your projects. So let's look at some of the areas we advise you have within your temporary works registers. The register, reference number and short description of the works being conducted. The design brief issued and its date. The date required. The risk classification from Table 1. The design company and which individual has authorised the design. The design checker's company and which individual within that organisation has checked the design. The design check category. The design date completed. The design date checked and approved. the erection completed, checked, and the date the permit to load was issued, the date the permit to unload was issued and the date it was taken out of use, and any third-party approvals. These do not all need to be identified on the front cover or the running register at the front of the folder. These can be included within the individual sections behind with the basic information you require at the front. This is down to how the company wishes to manage the process, but best practice is that these areas are included. Within the management and control of your temporary works, it is key that you have a safe system of works implemented. Following the direction from CDM Regulations 2015, it is recommended that the following areas are implemented within your site. You should have method statements and risk assessments for the works being conducted. You should have an inspection and test plan identifying the different areas of check-in for the temporary works in line with the permanent works design, and how this is going to be implemented and by who on site. Your permits and loads required for different areas of the project, when they will be loaded and when will be issued for unloading, and any design checklists which have been issued within the design pack. So thank you for sitting in this presentation. We hope you have taken something from the series. If we advise in your teams that you discuss, do these points identified in this presentation meet your project requirements? And do you need to relook at your processes to be able to safely implement the temporary works on site? We thank Core Construct for lending us their slides for these presentations. And if you wish to learn more about temporary works, we advise you attend a CITB authorised course